Over to National 2 North now, where the three rearranged games that took place last Saturday due to the postponements in round 11 certainly had an impact on the state of play as we prepare to enter round 12 this weekend. And we'll start at the bottom, and we'll start with Harrogate, who began last Saturday afternoon in 14th place at the bottom of National 2 North, but picked up a thoroughly deserved 39-7 win over Otley. Just a second victory of the season for Martin Wood and Dan Scarborough's men. And in fact, 11 of the 20 points they have accumulated so far this term have come in the last 4 games. So have Harrogate now turned a corner at a crucial stage in the season, with the midway point of the term not too far away at all. Elsewhere, Sheffield Tigers also began the day in the bottom 2 alongside Harrogate, and whilst they are still in the bottom 2, it is off the back of an excellent 29-15 win against table rivals Hull. Now, Jack Howard's side scored 20 unanswered points in the second half to seal their second success of the season, and like Harrogate, the majority of their points they picked up this term have come in the last month of steps in the right direction for both Sheffield Tigers and Harrogate in what is becoming an increasingly tight bottom half of National 2 North. And before we show you the standings, we also wanted to look back at the other fixture that took place last weekend between Leeds Tykes and 4th placed Fylde, and with league leaders Lim picking up another bonus point victory to continue their perfect start to the campaign in round 11, and title rival Sheffield also picking up a maximum. The Tykes might have felt like they had a bit of pressure on them to get a result at Woodlands, and my goodness me, didn't Pete Seaborn's side show immense determination and immense character to seal a 22-17 bonus point victory in Lancashire, which also ended Fylde's unbeaten home record. And as it was well documented before the game, wasn't it? The Leeds Tykes lost there at Woodlands last season, which shows again why it's a brilliant result for Leeds Tykes. And what it means for the table then heading into this weekend is Leeds are moved back above Sheffield up to second place, with the top 3 separated by just 5 points, while at the bottom, just look how close it is as we approach the midway point of the season. 8 points separating the bottom half, with Billingham dropping to the foot of the table due to the results of Sheffield Tigers and Harrogate last weekend. And at the top of the bottom half, if that makes sense, are 8th placed Hull Ionians, and they visit our second feature club on the National League Rugby preview show this week in the form of 7th placed Preston Grasshoppers. Now, Preston are certainly making strides forward under head coach Dan Orwin, who took the role as head coach at the start of this season. But internally, Hoppers may feel they could actually be in the top 6 heading into December if 1 or 2 tight scorelines they experienced at the start of the season had fallen their way. But as it stands, Hoppers currently 7th as they prepare to welcome Hull Ionians to Lightfoot Green on Saturday. But something a little bit different this week on the National League Rugby preview show, whilst discussing the season so far for Preston, and of course looking ahead to this weekend's game against Hull Ionians, we wanted to highlight the important role clubs like Preston play in their region when it comes to developing players, whilst also being the heart of their community. Now, I know head coach Dan Orwin is massively passionate about this, and in terms of developing the right culture at Preston as well. And it is a view shared by former Hopper and current Sale Sharks director of rugby, Alex Sanderson. And Alex kindly gave up some of his time last week to have a chat with us on the National League Rugby preview show about all of the things we've just mentioned. So here is our feature on Preston, which is a mixture of conversations with Sale director of rugby, Alex Sanderson, and of course, Preston Grasshoppers head coach, Dan Orwin.
I went to Hoppers from Littleborough when I was 12 years old, and absolutely loved it. Some of my fondest memories of playing with Steve Borthwick, Ian Bowshaw, John Kirkpatrick, who's ahead of S&C here, was all for that same team at Hoppers. Mal, who was the coach at the time, I'm still in touch with. He texts me after big wins and now and again for the odd ticket, and I go down for the formal events that they asked me to go down to, which I can make. Like, it's still a big part of my personality pie, in that sense. Fan South Coast's such a breeding ground for rugby talent. And, you know, I think that the majority of professional rugby players, you do their own stats, but I've been told this, comes from the north. So it means you need like clubs that can service the amount of rugby players so they're able to make the transition through grassroots into the professional game. We have that with Hoppers, we have it with Sedge. We've got a good relationship with Caldy, Donny and Coventry, Fylde, Lim, Rosendale. These are all clubs that our players actually coach and have coached in the past. Byron coached Preston, Byron McGuigan, as well as Rosendale this year. So not only are they important for our players to go and blood themselves, but they're also important for our older players who coach, who are looking to get into coaching as well down the line. That's so important. And we're lucky up north to have so many. More and more when I look around and realise the influence that we can have, not, you know, locally, regionally. It's humbling and brilliant. It's the best part of the job.
I was going to say, Alex, like, you know, you mentioned the players and coaches there, but how important are these clubs to the ecosystem of Northern rugby as well? I know, you know, some games that, you know, I've been down to Sale Sharks and the crowds have been fantastic, and that sometimes filters into those National 1, National 2 games as well. So how important are these clubs to be hubs of community to keep growing the game in the region?
I can't stress that more and more often, because of the negative slant that's been portrayed in the media around the lawsuit that's pending with the WRU, less and less mums are taking the sons or the daughters to the local club to play rugby, like less and less. And it breaks me, like, because it's such a good game for sport, but in terms of culture as well. Like, you get so much more out of this culturally by way of having to work within a team through discipline and all that, and respecting the ref than any other sport that I've bore witness to. And I'm biased, obviously. So for to have like community hubs, and it's not just a rugby club, but a community hub that Preston is, where you learn to play a sport, but they keep mates for life, like I have with Kirky. You know, that relationship where you can look back and with some fondness of formative years, where there wasn't the stress of professional rugby around. Like, it's life defining. Yeah, it makes kids into boys and boys into men. Like, I truly believe that. Clubs like that do, and we've had Hoppers coaches down last year. We've got a couple playing for them this year, and the relationship will remain to be strong as long as have some influence here. That we will strive to form stronger relationships with all the clubs in the local vicinity.
I'm really proud to be the head coach of Preston Grasshoppers, and the players are really proud to play for the club. So often it's about revisiting those traditions and thinking, well, actually, you know, I'm quite philosophical about this. I think as a coach, your time at a club's quite finite, isn't it? And I think you have to respect kind of the people who've been in that position before as a coach or as a player. You know, the people who've worn that shirt before. I think you have to be really respectful of that and what it means to a lot of people as well. And know that you're only there for a short time. So, you know, it's about doing it the best that you can and keeping some of those traditions and cultures and really wanting to push on as well. I guess we've pushed really hard with the culture, with the players. You know, and I know a lot of coaches talk about culture. It's often a bit of a throwaway thing. Culture, you know, it's got to be positive. Well, yeah, obviously, but I think I genuinely believe that the culture is important. You know, getting the right people on the bus, as it were, as well, around making sure the right people are in place. People understanding the roles, knowing what the team expect as well would be a big one for us. And then I think revisiting that, because it's all right having a culture, but if you only mention it in pre-season, then it gets lost. So we revisit that fairly regularly. I think we're doing a good job at the minute of reviewing each month. We're taking each month as it comes, each block of games, and we're doing quite a good job of reviewing that with the players and setting some targets for the next month as well. So I think there's been quite a bit, to be fair. As you said, it's my first year at Hoppers as head coach, and yeah, it comes with a big workload and probably a lot of expectation as well. So yeah, coaches working really, really hard behind the scenes to make sure that we're in the best possible place to work up the table.
And I guess, maybe the different side of the spectrum, Dan, is kind of developing players as well. Of course, you want to have that success. You want to move up the table. But I know you mentioned before we hit record that you're obviously involved in the North of England under 18 setup as well. So how important is it for you as a head coach to also not only develop a culture where the players are enjoying themselves, but develop the players themselves to potentially take that next step or develop into a lasting player at Preston Grasshoppers?
I'm huge on developing the players that we've got. I mentioned before, and part of that development is around developing things like role clarity, the players understanding what is required of their role and what the team need from them as well. And I guess, me as a coach, that's probably my bread and butter. I think I'd be quite proud that I'm able to develop the players and work on a one-to-one basis in some instances with players, reviewing where they're at and things. And I think, we've got evidence of that this year already. So, there's players in our first team, thinking about Deck Norrington, Ewan Naylor, Harry Holden, top try scorer in the league off the back of the drive mauls. Like, they're three players that didn't get a great deal of first team rugby last season or the season before, and the players that we've kind of recognised actually with work. These players have got exactly the attitudes that we want from a Preston Grasshoppers player. They've got the right behaviours, they're driving the right habits and training, and with a little bit of work and a little bit of development, then those guys are going to be top players for Hoppers. And two of those guys have just hit 50 caps this year. So yeah, we're really quite proud of that. We're bringing a lot of young players through as well. So we've got a couple of young players. Jack Lightyler, who's our player of the season last year, is injured currently, but Owen Williams is another one that we're working with, a young player. We've got Ben Hay. All these lads are 19. Lots and lots of exciting talent. Just need a little bit of guidance, a little bit of development. But we'll back them and we'll go with them. We'll give them opportunities if we think they're ready.
It's clear your passion there for developing these players, Dan, is tenfold just listening to you. But how, Preston aren't the only club who do this, but how important is our clubs like your Prestons, your Fields, your National League clubs in general to the development of these young players, not only within the system, but I know in the Northwest, Sale Sharks are very much a part of the ecosystem. But how important do the roles of these national clubs play in the development of young players, do you think?
I think it's absolutely huge, and it's often understated, it's often overlooked. But I think, I didn't mention the link with Sale, but we've got a great link with Sale. We have I think three dual registered players at the minute, so three of their talented young players are coming to us to get their rugby exposure. I think it's huge.
They're very much spoon fed here. Like, you try and take everything away from them, so they can just focus on their own game. When they go to a champ club on a Tuesday night, having trained during that day, and a Thursday, a champ or a national team, they've got to give themselves wholly to a different environment, to a different set of principles, and then understand that they've got to do that every week. Like that's the biggest shift that a schoolboy can make from amateur schoolboy rugby to professional rugby, is the consistency in which they're able to apply themselves week in, week out, and there still is consequence of the weekend, with consequence of older men holding them accountable. They come from being superstars since they were 14, scoring 4 tries a game, to getting beaten up when they're 18. And that's the biggest learning curve for them. And without those clubs, they wouldn't have that ability to play, to fail, to reflect and grow.
The national leagues are so important in terms of developing the players of the future, if that makes sense, and giving them the exposure that they need. Because it's a good level, isn't it? I mean, National 1, National 2, you share the try-lights each week. There's some phenomenal rugby being played in the national leagues, and it needs to be celebrated more, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Dan. And I don't think anybody who's connected with National League Rugby will disagree with what you just said about there in terms of celebrating the rugby and celebrating these players that do have that commitment week in, week out over the course of a 26-game campaign. But we are hitting the halfway mark of the season, Dan. And obviously, first up for you guys is Hull Ionians. I mean, what would you like to see from Preston during this kind of December period, this Christmas period? Because I'm guessing maybe consistency might be something you guys are wanting to put your finger on a little bit.
Yeah, I think that'd be exactly it. I mean, we're going into Saturday off the back of, well, for us, a bad run. We've lost the last two, and we've not picked up a league point out of either of the last two either, which is really frustrating for us, especially based on what I'd said before. We want to be winning games, and to not pick up points away at Wharfdale, we didn't play particularly well, and home to Sheffield, we did some great stuff in the second half, but we left it too late to get anything out of that. So yeah, for me, it's definitely consistency around. Consistency of effort, consistency of performance as well, and we know if we can get that right, Saturday should be a good day for us. I think, yeah, in comparison to last year and the year before, as you said, we finished 11th, so current league position is much more respectable, much kind of, and I think probably in terms of how we're feeling about it, probably a little bit frustrated. I think if you look at some of our the really close results that we've had, the first two games losing by 2 points, and Tynedale at home, we not being able to hold on in the last couple of minutes for a win there. I think if we get over the line with those games, and you're probably maybe talking about sitting fourth or third potentially. So yeah, I guess we're happy with the progress that we're making in relation to last year, but we've probably still got some work to do, if that makes sense. But in terms of our focuses for December, I mean, we've got 2 home games. We've got obviously Ionians at home on Saturday, one below us in the table. We've got Lim away, and as you know, Lim are absolutely flying at the minute, which is, credit to the work that they're doing there. I know the forwards coach, Mark Williams, there really well, and I know the work that they're doing. And, I think they've surprised everybody this season, Lim. So if we can go there, we want to be confident that we can get a result there as well. Ultimately, somebody's got to beat them one day. I'm hoping they're not going to go the whole season unbeaten. Why can't it be us at their place on an AGP, which we're used to playing on? And then Fylde at home, that's it's not, they're all big games, don't get me wrong, but I think that's the one that people, when the fixture lists are announced at the start of the season, in our area, when a Fylde playing Hoppers, so that's always got a bit of extra spice as well, being the Christmas game at Hoppers this year for the first time in a couple of years. So consistency, if we can get through these next 3 games with a decent amount of league points, would be really happy going into Christmas break.
So massive thanks to Dan for his time this week. And of course, a huge thanks to Alex and the Sale Sharks media team for helping us with that segment of the show. And we know that Preston aren't the only team across National League Rugby who help develop players who may have come on loan from a Premiership side, or develop players who are currently in the system at a National League Rugby club. But it's always nice to hear and great to hear that the views of a National League Rugby club are shared by a current Premiership director of rugby. So a big thanks again to Dan and Alex for their time. And I'm sure Dan and everybody at Preston would appreciate your support on Saturday against Hull Ionians if you're in and around the area of Lightfoot Green. And I'm sure they would appreciate it as well if you're able to turn out on December the 21st when Preston welcome Fylde to Lightfoot Green for the Christmas Lancashire Derby. Always brilliant occasions, that final game before we break for Christmas. And around 1,500 people were actually at the reverse game between Preston Grasshoppers and Fylde at Woodlands back in September. And both games last season had really, really healthy crowds too. And as we say, it's always a great occasion. So get yourself down to Lightfoot Green on December the 21st for a full day of entertainment with, of course, the 80 minutes of National 2 North Rugby taking centre stage. And just one final thing to mention from a Preston perspective, great work from the club who raised over £1,000 for November last month. Dan there sporting an excellent moustache, and all the efforts, of course, by Preston go to a brilliant cause. So well done to them across the course of November. So then let's have a look at the rest of the fixtures that are taking place in round 12 in National 2 North. And the aforementioned Fylde will be looking to bounce back from successive defeats when they travel to bottom of the table. Billingham, the hosts, looking to halt a run of 5 straight losses against another tough opposition. So a big game for both sides there. A big game also towards the bottom with 12th place Hull hosting Harrogate. Hull level on points with 13th place Sheffield Tigers, but are outside the bottom 2 because they have won one more game than the Tigers. So they'll be desperate to increase that tally against the table rival in Harrogate. Speaking of Sheffield Tigers, they travelled to second place Leeds Tigers, but as we repeatedly say on this show, the Tigers' home record is superb. They actually haven't lost on their own patch since Plymouth Albion beat them in National 1 back in April 2023. So that is a task facing Sheffield this weekend. Elsewhere, Otley welcomed Tynedale to Cross Green. After 8 games without a win to begin this season, it was an unbeaten November for Tyne, which included 2 away wins against Sheffield Tigers and Hull Ionians, respectively. Current coach and former Premiership player Carl Ferns pulled on the boots in round 11 for Tyne and posted this photo after their 16-12 win away at Hull Ionian. So can the feel-good factor continue this weekend for Carl and those of a Tynedale persuasion? Preston Grasshoppers versus Hull Ionians, we've mentioned the eyes themselves looking to respond in that one after back-to-back defeats. And arguably one of the picks of the weekend in National 2 North sees third place Sheffield host league leaders Lim. Just 5 points separate the two teams. Lim are the only club in National League Rugby with a 100% record of 11 bonus point wins to their name. Sheffield have lost just once at home in just under 14 months. So when you add all of that up, it has all the ingredients to be a brilliant contest in South Yorkshire between 2 of the top 3. And I'm sure second place Leeds Tigers will be keeping tabs on the outcome at Aberdale Park. Should be a brilliant game, that one, between Sheffield and Lim. And finally, Wharfdale, who have won their last 3 games at the Avenue, entertain 6th place Chester, who will be keen to translate their excellent recent home form onto the road.